Kintsugi Heroes acknowledges funding and was made possible with support from the Community Broadcasting Foundation. Find out more at cbf.org.au. Welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes, helping people tell the stories they need to share so you can find the stories that you need to hear. In this episode, John Millam sits down with Ben Drysdale, a musician whose journey through adversity has shaped his art and community work. Diagnosed with ADHD at 41, Ben found a sense of relief and a framework for understanding his past struggles, including rejection-sensitive dysphoria. His passion for music started in early childhood and evolved through emotional highs and lows, leading him to use songwriting as a form of self-expression and a tool for healing. Ben's story is one of resilience, creativity, and a deep commitment to helping others through the power of art and storytelling. Enjoy this one with Ben Drysdale.
So, welcome back, Kintsugi listeners, to another conversation, a Kintsugi Heroes conversation, stories that matter. And I'm particularly excited to have this conversation. A couple of months ago, I attended a conference, and in that conference, there was some workshops around mental health and the process, and trauma and understanding how to deal with that through different ways. One of the workshop presentations was my guest today, Ben Drysdale, and then Ben gave us a workshop on music and creativity and art as a way of managing an experience. And then Ben was part of the closing ceremony where he delivered a version of his new single, "Listen Now," I think, which was an awesome performance. So I'm particularly chuffed to welcome Ben Drysdale to the podcast. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks for having me,
mate. It's my pleasure. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what you presented at the conference, hopefully, and share some insights. But clearly, I read in the bio 2004. You were in bands and playing. That you've been playing music your whole life. Where does the music in you come from, mate?
I think everybody's got the. When you're my age, it's the tapes or the records or the CDs that you used to listen to with your family. For me, it was road trips down to the coast, listening to Cat Stevens, and I think
T for the Tillerman.
We were doing the best of, so I think T for the Tillerman was on there, but it wasn't that album. And I think I've always loved music, and my parents always were keen to get me exposed to it, even though our own record collection was largely classical music with, I think there was like one Eagles record, Cat Stevens record, a Michael Jackson record, and the rest was all classical music until I started bringing my own music into the household. But I think in terms of the stuff, the kind of the folky side of stuff that I've kind of done solo all throughout the last couple of decades, while my bands have been a little bit less folky, sometimes a little bit more funky, a bit of reggae, a bit of blues. So I'm only just now 20 years into it, kind of releasing stuff under my own name for the first time, and kind of I guess just coming around to the fact that perhaps I'm talented and worthy enough as a musician and a songwriter without having to have, other people to make me look good.
Yeah, wow. That sounds like an amazing step into that whole, attaching sort of worth journey to a solo career. What are you hoping? What are you hoping about a music career? Because you've got, I love the idea. You real cutting edge stuff, like bringing, that's so much, both creativity and community connection involved in, say, the theatre you're working with people who, connecting out of their challenge, right, or disability. But what are you hoping for, right? Is like, what do you want to get out of music?
So there's a few different questions in there. I mean, firstly, I think what I get out of music is, a number of things. Personally, it's very, it's a cathartic thing for me, especially, when writing songs that address a personal experience that's been challenging. It's a way of processing my own thoughts and feelings on it, that gets them outside of me and gives me a channel to express them. And the act of performing those songs and putting that emotion behind those songs, whether it's the emotion that inspired the original song or whether it's something I'm dealing with today that can channel through a song that I wrote 10 years ago. That's all extremely cathartic. And so that's sort of a very selfish side of what I get out of it. But I guess, I can get that out of it, whether I ever, make a buck off it or not. But I think what I'm really at a point where what I'm realizing is that I've always kept these kind of like the music side and the social justice and community side, theatre thing as in my head as these two separate things that exist independently of each other. And what I've sort of realized in the last little while, since doing a course about sort of how musicians kind of need to market themselves in this social media age, is like, you can't just be a musician. You've got to be a content creator as well. And through that process of, no one's going to be interested in your music unless they're interested in you and your story, and really looking at what my story is and why I do what I do, and and realizing that it's all, the reason I've been running a social justice theatre company for 10 years is the same reason that I play music for myself or what that does for other people, and that storytelling about the bad times or the good times is a way for the collective experience, whether that's the broader collective experience or the collective experience of marginalized groups or people who have experienced mental health challenges or hardships in some ways, is a a path to catharsis and healing for people as a community, whether it's the wider community or smaller communities, and that I want to, perhaps take some of the community work that we've done in the theatre space into the music space, and I'm really interested in looking for opportunities to, work with various communities and create music or facilitate them to create music. I'm really interested in that kind of teaching songwriting to non-songwriters, and because I guess that's kind of that's what we largely do in the theatre company. Like most of the groups we work with are not people with acting experience, but we work with them to create theatre pieces around their shared experiences about things that they want to say and what topics that they want to advocate about. And I think that there's a huge demand and need for like a musical version of that in the world as well. We've just got to find the way to fund it. So if you mate, let me know.
Mate, well, not-for-profit world, if we can crack that, right, we'd be geniuses, right? They'd beat a path to our door. It's interesting because there's that whole element that like it's fascinating, the power of storytelling. Of course, on Kintsugi we believe that as well. That's why we're having this conversation, right? Storytelling has power both for the people involved in the telling and sharing of the story, but also for the greater world, right? Putting that story out there has impact beyond our conversation. I wonder if that's not also true, like music, songs, right? Because you're talking about the process of helping people share their story through the channel of music and theatre, but you also have your own story, right? So how important is balancing that? Is when you talked about your catharsis by either through the emotion of your current song or a previous song, is that is it about having to create? Is that the way you balance yourself? Is that the important skill that you possess to put that out, or is it just happens to work for you, right? And you have the talent.
I do feel like the answer. There's more than one answer to your earlier question about why I sort of ended up where I ended up, and it's ultimately that like I'd be doing it because I have to do it. Whether I was trying to make any career out of it or not, like it's, there's a huge personal benefit when you share a piece of yourself like that and you see it connect with people and you watch them feel, and it makes you feel like you're doing something good for the world. And I think that's, and then that's sort of the more live element. And then, like you said, like, we can sit here and we can record this conversation and we can hope that thing goes out. Same with recording a song that once it's out there, you hope that then it's making a difference somewhere out there as well. Whether it's making someone, feel validated about how shit they feel that day, or whether it's making them, pumping them up.
It's amazing stuff. You're like, I loved listening to the song you shared with the conference, and then subsequently on Spotify. What do you hope your songs do in the world?
This has been a thing that I'm kind of like trying to ask myself while I try and sort of become more of a self-made musician rather than someone who was just sitting there waiting for some record label to do something or some manager or something. The fact that I have these sort of two sides to my artistic career, the theatre and the music, and that for some reason I've kept this social justice side completely separate from the music side while constantly writing songs about mental health and not really clicking that there was this huge kind of like crossover between the two, and that I just sort of had this epiphany that like I think that the entire world is controlled by trauma, whether it's big T trauma or little T trauma, that everybody, whoever you are, you've got some moment in your life where something happened to you and your assumption that you were safe and looked after in the world was taken away by, whether it's something massive or whether it's the fact that some kid knocked you over and stole your sandwich or anything like that. And that's when people experience trauma or in any way that they're stripped of a number of things that they then spend the rest of their life trying to get back to varying degrees of success. And they're stripped of they're stripped of innocence, they're stripped of agency, they're stripped of power and safety. And that, depending on what it is, whatever that thing is that's happened to you, people spend the rest of their lives trying to get that back in one way or another, whether that's through career, fitness, creativity. I'm sharing more, like through my content, I'm sharing more bits and pieces of my own mental health struggles and the strategies, basic strategies that I can try and use on a day-to-day basis to get through them. and then just putting my song behind it and stuff like that as a way of connecting with people, and sharing a bit more of myself with people that way. Trying to give people a sense, myself and people a sense of power by, in the case of Listen Now, I wrote that song about helping a mate through, some pretty bad mental health stuff. So I'm using that as an opportunity to, I'm donating 50% of Bandcamp sales of that to mental health charities. That's giving my sense a sense of power to do something outside of myself, and offering, people who might be interested in my music a way that, like, you can support me and you can support a good cause at the same time. And just trying to have more non-judgmental dialogue, both through content on stage, through speaking opportunities, podcasting opportunities, to, I guess try and create a greater sense of safety for myself and for anybody who is having trouble coming back from all of those things.
So just with like, it's interesting because you talked about social justice and the bigger picture, right? And also, the level of trauma across both, our community and even greater, right, in the world, right? And yet the process you're using to address that is a very personal one, right? It comes from your touching your circumstance and your emotions, right? And then you express that, and by proxy, other people seem to have a reaction to it. It touches them as well, and so it's how do you reconcile the idea that I can change the world by touching and healing my own situation through the, songwriting and singing and performing?
Well, I think, I guess the other thing that you lose when you experience trauma of some form is a sense of trust. And I'll have to put that into this thing. And I think that in order for people to transform anybody's life in any way, they need to be able to trust you, and they won't trust you if you're not being vulnerable with them in some way, or showing them that they're safe to engage with you. And so I think, you've got to be honest and vulnerable when you're asking for anybody to engage with you in any way. And I've definitely found that in, it's kind of I only got diagnosed at the age of 41, but I've been working in this space for a long time, and I've been open about the fact that I've had mental health challenges throughout that whole time, but I never had a diagnosis, and I was never I always say that I've had a lot of anxiety and depression, but I knew people who were clinically diagnosed, and I was looking at the difference between me and them and going, well, I'm not that depressed, or I'm not that anxious, so this must just be the normal level of anxious and depressed. And it turns out that the normal level is none. And that was all symptomatic of my ADHD. But, so now I've got a different way to frame the way I think about myself and the way I think about the world. But prior to that, I still needed to be vulnerable. I still needed to, be open and honest in order to earn the trust of any of the people that I've worked with previously, especially if you're an arts kid walking into a room full of soldiers, and asking them to be vulnerable with you. You can't do that without any kind of, vulnerability and honesty yourself.
Yeah, you're putting it on the line.
Mm.
Yeah. What do you think has changed as a result of, say, diagnosis? Do you think that's has that allowed you? Has that empowered you, or has that sort of given you thought for of some sort of restriction?
It's a roller coaster for me. Like, I think for me, it's been largely positive. I think when people get a diagnosis, the initial go-tos are either shame or relief.
Yeah.
There's a huge range in amongst that, but you'll go one way or another, or back and forth between them. But I think they're kind of like the two main kind of ends of the spectrum when someone gets a diagnosis. And for me, it was much more relief. It was like, oh, finally, okay, now I can understand. I can frame my own understanding of myself and why I've been struggling so long, and all these things that made me feel that I was maybe just a horrible person, or these things that I struggled to make either a horrible person or a useless person or a crap person, or that there was something deeply wrong with my soul. It just is an experience that many people will relate to me with, because they've experienced the same thing, and it's neurological. It's not my soul. It's those little bits of matter and the exact way in which they're arranged within my brain.
Yeah.
So, largely it was a relief that, specifically with ADHD, there's, I learned a lot as I got the diagnosis, about things like rejection-sensitive dysphoria, which, we, as people with ADHD, we have this like visceral emotional and physical response to when we perceive that we're being rejected in some way, that other people don't understand. And like I look back on, so many friendships and relationships that might have broken down, that I've felt completely validated in the way that I handled myself in that, because my perception of what was going on was that, these people had wronged me in some way, and that ultimately to look back on all that and go, well, fuck, like, actually, maybe they didn't. And it was all in my head. That side of things been a much tougher pill to swallow. And I guess an interesting thing to carry and navigate through, my current relationship with my wife, who's borne the brunt of my RSD a number of times, and felt completely at a loss as to how to come out of some situation. And it's great because it gives me a framework to look at it, and a thing to ask myself every time I'm getting a feeling like that. It's like, is this a valid response? Is this the RSD?
What's the evidence for me feeling I'm being rejected, right?
Yeah. Or is it some combination of the two? So, I mean, it's
an interesting choice, interesting challenge to choose a career where, the feedback is visceral and available. Right?
Daily available.
Yeah. Right. And you invite people to review you, right? Which is like, oh my goodness, that's a tough.
I know.
A tough gig.
I'm an idiot.
Not at all.
Unfortunately, I'd embedded this career choice long before I knew that I had this problem.
Yeah. Do you think that you talked about how cathartic it was to express the emotions that come out in the song? Is that what, was this you finding a way to deal with, your challenges, your mental health challenges and so on before before diagnosis, or what did help? What else was involved in managing this?
Yeah, I think it's been one of my forms of self-therapy my whole life. Not, the same way, like jumping around, thrashing about, listening to Nirvana, when I was a kid to express my friggin' teen spirit.
Yeah.
You know, at a time when, you know, being a teenager is a rough thing. Like it's so rough just in the most well-off scenarios, just because everybody's going through immense mental strain trying to figure out who they are and learn how to be in the world, and will often bring each other down to get up, like, let alone what it's like in a, you know, in a less privileged scenario. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, listening to music was a huge way of getting through difficult emotional and mental times. I played in bands all through like school and high school, but I was like a campfire, you know, cover song. Like you see my Cat Stevens and my John Lennon and my Counting Crows, and I didn't actually start writing my own songs until I was over 20 and already studying over in Canada. Like I did my first gigs as a just singer-songwriter at open mics in Canada. And I'd been in this relationship. The first song I ever wrote was like I'd been in this relationship for like sort of 4 years, 2 years of being in the relationship. Then I was like, you know, I was part of a bit of a toxic scene here, and I needed to get out of it. And I moved down to Melbourne. We were kind of breaking up, but then she ended up moving down, and so the relationship went on. And then I like went to Canada to study, and we sort of stayed together despite that. And then I came back and was like, I've actually got to go for another year because the program was so amazing, and we were like still together. And it's like, you know, I feel like we're flogging a dead horse here. And anyway, we broke up not long after I went back for the second year, and it wasn't until then that I wrote my first song.
Which kind of, you know, one of the questions I have is, do you have to have, you know, do you have to have angst? Do you have to have struggle? Do you have to have, you know, personal, you know, challenges to be a good songwriter? You know, we certainly sort of think of artists as having a unique perspective and almost a tortured perspective on the world. You know, are you better off having broken up than together in a comfortable relationship, right?
So I mean, for a long time, I could only write 1 or 2 songs a year, and it would have to be either a particular point of angst or a particular point of elation for some reason. Like that was either, you know,
either end of the spectrum you could write.
Yeah. Right. And that was it. That was all I wrote. The beauty of it is, like, you know, it's gone from this whole like, oh, I have to have this either deeply traumatic experience or something has to be going really well in order for me to create a song, to like, we can create a song off a simple idea, like, or you know, what's a feeling that exists in the world? What, you know, or just, you know, people, I think a lot of us will sit there with little notes in our phone, and they're like, you'll get one lyric idea and you just jot that in, and then that becomes the basis of a whole co-write. So, I mean, personally, I love that freedom to create more has been opened up to me, because, you know, it was really frustrating when all I could write was in those circumstances.
I could imagine it's like sticking a needle in to get an output out. So, yeah. Hey, what do you think? Is it, if you have talent, you know, if you can do what you can do, is fame a part of it? Is that something you need or want, or is that a measure of success?
I don't necessarily want fame, but I need a critical mass of people to know who I am and to care about me enough to financially contribute to me
So there's a
keeping my
practical
ankle.
element to fame, right?
There's a
Yeah.
practical element to fame, and I think like, we probably have to be somewhat narcissistic in order to be like,
Yeah.
get up on stage in the first place and say, hey,
Yeah.
look at me.
Yeah.
I don't know if narcissism is probably not the word that I want to use, because I've got some experience with some toxically narcissistic people, and I don't want to assign that to artists in general. But I think there has to be some, no matter how hard you can try not to seek external validation, I think everybody's done that. I think everybody, a lot of people do it in some way. I do think it's a particularly bigger thing for those with ADHD. It's something that we have to work harder to not do than your average Joe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm way more interested in the practical elements of. I think fame, to the degree that you see it as a thing, is like, can be more problematic than it can be practical in a lot of ways. But I do think that, I know that there are people out there who will connect with me and my story and will like my music. And it's at the moment, I'm just like in that process of trying to find the ways to find them through the algorithms, really.
Yeah.
And hopefully some clips from this will do exactly that.
Yeah. Well, I hope so too, because I think you've got a voice, and the voice is has value out there. I think you're one of the people who are saying something that we need to hear. So it's interesting because when you think about it, you say a practical side of fame or whatever, but what would you like what would you like to have happen, right? Would you like more songs? Would you like, more power, like songs to have more impact? Would you like a whole, a playlist happening at the time? Would you like a famous album? What would you love to have happened?
What my goal really is to to have a community of people who there's probably a few spheres to it. There's a community of people who, will come to a gig or whatever, or listen to a track on Spotify. That's great. Within that, you've got people who will follow me more closely on social media. Within that, you've got, and maybe they'll buy merch or whatever. Once in a while, we'll pay for a song or an album instead of just streaming it on Spotify. And then within that, there's this, what I love in the way that the industry, not only the music industry, but, it's across any kind of like public platform, that social media has kind of created this opportunity for people to engage more deeply. And then, through things like Patreon or other subscription services, in the same way that the difference between someone listening to you on Spotify or coming to a live gig, they get a more personal experience with you and you share things with them that the Spotify person doesn't get. That people are sort of creating these communities of fans or followers, where there's a lot more personal interaction between them. You're doing special pieces of content or online hangouts with them that other people don't get, and ultimately, I want to be finding my people for that. But yeah, I mean, really, what I want is just to be able to spend my entire life making music, making content, sharing it with people, and having chats about all the reasons we do all those things. And, you know, I sort of sat down and wrote out a bit of what the dream life is, and having opportunities like this to just, you know, half the time when I do something like this, I'm figuring out my life as we talk through it. And I think that's an okay way to be. I think we have this this concept that everybody has their shit together and knows what they're doing, and they're all just figuring it out. Like,
totally.
You know, when you're a kid and you look at adults, you're like, oh yeah, they are an authority because they understand everything and they know what's going on. It's like, yeah, they've got a bit more understanding, but if little me could know how much I'm just getting by on the fly as adult me, he would be shocked and appalled. That's where, you know, it's what we're all doing. But yeah, I think that's the answer. I want to be able to find my tribes, find the tribe that's you know, got $5 a month to spare, enough of those people that can pay my bills so I can keep making music.
Yeah. You know, you share your music. You know, you invite us to join you on that process and support you. Well, you know, it's a hard gig, right? But you've navigated your challenges, your mental health challenges. You're working with people. You're creating some good in that others can connect to. A bit of a legacy in that space. You got family. You know, what would you like us to know about the whole, you know, Ben Drysdale, songwriter, singer?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess part of it is figuring out that it's not just the Ben Drysdale songwriter singer, it's the Ben Drysdale songwriter singer, the Ben Drysdale dad, the Ben Drysdale ADHD, the Ben you know, that it's all of those things, and that there's a lot of fun to be had, and there's a lot of healing to be done.
Yeah.
And shared, and that we can all help each other do that.
I have a feeling that would, there's, you know, some pretty cool lyrics in, a lot of fun to be had and a lot of healing to be shared, man. So yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'll write that down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to use it for yet. I've thought about whether it's a podcast idea or maybe the name of a community that people sign up to or something. But Squirrel Brains and Growing Pains is the
wow. Yeah.
Maybe it's an album title, or maybe it's all.
Yeah. Well, maybe people on the podcast who listen to it could reach out with ideas about what you do as Squirrel Brains and Growing Pains. I love it. Right? It just has
patented, trademarked. Don't steal it, anyone.
Yeah.
It's actually not any of those things, but please don't steal it anyway.
Good call. I should have said that. Mate, I don't know about you, but I've enjoyed being a participant in exploring some of you know, your creative and life wisdom, right? And I think I hear that wisdom in your songs, and I really connected with it. So I'm looking forward to seeing lots more and watching that Patreon sort of double, triple, and maybe even get to 50 one day. Right?
Oh, imagine, that'd be great. No, look, I really appreciate you having me on here, and you know, your questions have led me in different ways from other interviews. Sometimes, you know, when you're doing a bunch of radio interviews around a release or whatever, you find yourself just kind of saying the same thing over and over again. And I appreciate how, while we've covered some similar ground to other stuff, we've had different and deeper conversations in some ways. And, you know, part of that's on you. So thank you for that. And
well, thank you. And then I think deep is your best place, mate. So look, may you be deep and keep producing those wonderful songs, mate. Thank you very much for being with Kintsugi Heroes today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Kintsugi Heroes. Thank you to Colin Lilly for permission to use Broken as our theme music for this series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.